Why is this a story that Black people living in the United States should care about, should want to invest in?
I mean, it's a story about how the US viewed Black people at the time. So Maurice Bishop, he was widely known as an incredibly charismatic speaker. And he, in the months leading up to when he was assassinated, he came to the US on an official visit to try to connect more with the American government and persuade them that Grenada and him in particular, that they weren't a threat, and that wasn't very successful. But during this trip, he would go around giving speeches, and largely to groups of Black Americans. He did one big one in DC with the Congressional Black Caucus, among other organizations. And then he went to New York and he did this speech at Hunter College that was recorded. And if you ever get the chance to watch the speech online, it's on YouTube. It'll give you chills, just the way that he's able to like make this crowd so kind of viscerally thrilled and excited and inspired by what he's saying. But in what he's talking about in that speech, he says, you know, the State Department and the United States government, like they're saying that Grenada is a threat because we're communist or Marxist, or that we are that it's because of our allyship with Cuba that the U.S. doesn't like us. But then in fact, it's about what we demonstrate as Black Americans. And he kind of talks about this State Department report that we don't know if it's real or not. And there's a chance that what he's referencing here was not actually a State Department secret report, as he says. But he talks about this idea that he thinks the State Department is saying, oh, this is about how Grenadians, English-speaking Black people in the Western Hemisphere, can speak to other English-speaking Black people in the United States and tell them about what's going on in Grenada and how exciting this new government is, and that was the real threat. And I feel like when you put it in those terms, it makes it clear that this is about how the U.S. Understood Black people at the time, and that it all fits into, you know, what was happening in the 70s and 80s and the Black Panther movement, and that it's all part of the same history.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think particularly right now, we're often talking about these diaspora wars. You know, are you from the Caribbean? Are you from the United States? Are you from, you know, the UK? I mean, are you hopeful that these kinds of stories will help people realize how universal the Black experience is, how, you know, united the diaspora is?
Yeah, I really hope so, because there is this cross-pollination that we don't often talk about, right? That like some of the most kind of lauded Black Americans who we hold up in Black history, I'm thinking Shirley Chisholm is an example. They're also Caribbean Americans, right? Like she was from Barbados, that's where she grew up, or she was born in the U.S., but that she spent her childhood in Barbados, and that so much of that is actually the same history. And so I feel like we don't talk about that as much as we should, and understand the ways in which different revolutionary movements and thought movements were affecting each other, inspiring each other, speaking to each other. You know, like Maurice Bishop, the Prime Minister, we talk in this series about how it wasn't until he went to London and was meeting these like thinkers in London, some of whom were other Caribbean people living there, but also Cuban revolutionaries, white and Black Cuban revolutionaries, or Black Americans who were living in London, that environment is what fueled him to want to kind of bring about this revolution in Grenada. And so understanding better the ways that what Black people were doing in different parts of the world at the same time, we're all speaking to each other, I think is so important in understanding that history.